But one thing I've always kind of talked about with hex staking as well, and I think this was like the design and the intention of the hex product, right? Was delay gratification. Yeah, instead of taking profits, now you can have like like a financial vehicle that can pay you interest, right? And then when we're looking at EHEX, PHEX, this is hexfire.io for anyone that's wondering. So you're able to see kind of the approximate ROIs depending on, I think it's depending on like a few different things in the system and stuff, but you can kind of see like I've never like I've always kind of said that I think 5555s are kind of they're the best bang for your buck, right? In terms of hex staking, you will have to wait that whole 555 like 15 years for that to unlock. But I've always even talked about like I think there was debates in the early days of hex between staking 10 years versus 15 years, and how because that T-share bonus would end at 10 years, it might not make a whole lot of sense to do the whole 15-year stake. But I've also kind of, especially now that we have more data for hex, right, and we've kind of looked into the system more, and we're able to kind of take more of an in-depth kind of look. We can compare what happens to your staking if you, let's say you stake for 10 years, let's say you start in 2025 and you stake till 2035, versus if you were to have held those same T shares to 2040, right? And we'll just take a look at the ROIs here, like very, very simply. So like Hexfire here is reporting 153% ROI if you, and that's ROI in Hex, by the way. We can also pull up the EHEX one here. So yeah, 153% ROI in PHEX essentially if you were to stake for 10 years, right? But if you hold on for that, like it's 50% longer or 5 more years, right? You can see your payout here, your APY in Hex 525%. So if Hex is what you're looking for, right? And Richard's always talked about like don't trade, especially don't margin trade. You'll most likely get yourself wrecked. Unless you have some sort of crazy edge, you'll probably most likely wreck yourself in margin trading. And Hex kind of prevents you from doing that, right? Like if you don't think in the next 15 years you can 500% your Hex stack through ratio trading, or I don't know if it's like fame trading on that like decentralized leverage platform. But if you can't like outperform Hex staking, then you should probably just be staking Hex, right? To also not get diluted by the inflation. But you can also see like 525%. I've kind of brought up the comparison. Like imagine you had a million Hex in 2025 and you stake it to 2035. You'll make 153%. So you'll make a million and a half more Hex, versus if you wait that extra 5 years, you will have made 5,250,000 more Hex, right? So
Hey, I've got a question. Are you serious about 15-year stakes?
Yeah,
it's actually great. Shout out to Crypto Land. It's actually a great question. And also you can
it's not
maybe
for
touch
everyone.
on, it's not, but also you can touch on the HSI's liquidity, the
Yeah,
ability to transfer.
that's a very good point.
That's something
Yeah,
a
that's a
little
very good
less
point.
known as well. Yeah.
So yeah, like I will say, like I'm not telling anyone to go take their entire bag, stake it 5555, and just call it a day, and go to sleep for the next 15 years and wake up. It's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying though is if like perhaps if especially if you're wrong, like if Hex plays out like Bitcoin and you get the max amount of yield for that's like for staking that 15 years, even versus 10 years, even versus 1 year, like your APY is not going to be anything crazy, right? Like yeah, it's not going to be anything crazy. There's also the Hedron protocol, right? Which is it's kind of we'll call it a layer 2 of Hex, and this allows you to create HSIs, which is kind of a wrapped Hex stake. So if you're doing native Hex staking, you're locked for 15 years, and there's pretty much like there's the emergency end stake button, and you will face a penalty if you have to emergency end stake. But other than that, there's pretty much nothing you can do if you want to get out of that Hex stake early. You'll have to face the penalty, right? So in the HSI, it's a little bit different because you can wrap it as an NFT and you could post it on markets like OpenSea, right? Or you could like you could OTC it if somebody else wanted it. You could also like it's called an HSI buyback. So you could actually trade in your HEX stake for another token called ICOSA, and you could sell this one on the market for profit, right? And we can go, Max, we've gone way more in depth with like COSA and ceiling prices and HSIs and everything like that. But yeah, nowadays, like we have technologies where you don't, even if you're staked for 15 years or even if you have a 15-year stake, it doesn't necessarily need to be locked in that HSI, like in the HSI format. And you can still have like kind of a pseudo liquid kind of stake in a way, right? Where it's transferable, right? You can move it into a different hard wallet, even if you wanted to as well, type of thing. So yeah, keep that in mind. Like, yeah, it's not for everyone, but I think even taking a tiny portion of your bag, and of course not financial advice or anything, and staking it, and I think you'll get the max value doing the whole 15 years, right? And when we're talking about compound interest, right? Like that's, I understand, what does he say? It's the eighth wonder of the world or whatever. And when we're talking about
Also
compound
made
interest,
HEX in number 9. Sorry, that was
yeah,
from
HEX compound
another
interest
song on that.
number 8, HEX number 9,
Shout out to whoever
PulseChain
made
number
that song.
10. But yeah, when we're talking about compound interest, you either need like a really, really big stack, or you need like a very, very, like very great amount of time, let's say. So in HEX, especially in crypto, right? 15 years it's a very long time in crypto. Like that's probably like 100 years in real life. Right? Like 15 years in crypto. So yeah, it's a very long time, but it's compounding, right? And that's what it is. And it's kind of like one of those things where, if it plays out like Bitcoin, I don't think you'll regret even staking a tiny bit of your HEX, right? And if it doesn't play out, then it shouldn't be an amount where it's like, oh shoot, I can't pay my mortgage because I staked HEX for 15 years, right? So yeah, it's kind of like that as well. So yeah,